you've got a long way to go to be able to deliver that, right? So again, the institutions must be looking at you, the market must be looking at you and going, you've got a bunch of baby steps to deliver to prove that this is properly a change of management, it's a change of attitude, and a change of approach, more importantly, to the asset. Because San Albino is, forget the checkered past, but it's got to be approached the right way. You've got to make the right assumptions. You don't get a second chance if those assumptions are wrong again, right?
No, 100%. So a couple of things to that. Looking back at the decision, forget about the pre-Mako, we can go over that as well. But on what I call day one of Mako, which was mid-March of last year, where, all right, we got the management change, and then, or at the very least in August of last year, where we had the permanent management change, where I took over as CEO, and then frankly kind of eliminated some, shall we say, factions over at the board, so that we were kind of swimming in the same direction. So depending on how you count, this business over at Mako either started 20 months ago or 14 months ago. We've been doing a lot, right, in that 12 to 14 month period. I don't think there's actually anything that we could have done to accelerate anything that we could have done, or the decisions that we were making over the course of the last 14 to 20 months. And the same thing is going to be going forward on the next 2, 3, 4, 5 year strategy as well. We don't like to wait, right? So we're trying to do things correctly with the right levels of data, but also the right levels of urgency. We would like to have investors that will come along for the ride as we execute on that strategy. But I'm in full agreement with you. There's actually a lot for us to do in order for us to execute on the 3 legs of the stool, which is building San Albino correctly and making sure that it's mined the correct way, that it's modeled the correct way, that we have a good handle on that, applying that model to our next deposit over at Las Conchitas, doing that so we can get this up to a much more reasonable mining rate in the context of global mining. And then thirdly, being able to explore and be successful at exploring the rest of our land package, because there's certainly targets to demonstrate the success over there. But all of those require capital, it requires expertise, and as with any exploration company, it requires luck to be successful.
Yeah. So I just went again for current investors looking at this. What's that runway look like? Because you want to go. You are going high speed internally, but you're not going high speed as far as the market is concerned, because you can't. You've got to do things in the right way, okay? So you've got to get to the point where you can feed the mill, right? And that's going to take, say, the drill bit, some luck, some expertise, and hopefully you find what you want to find, and you're chasing more high grade veins. Great, but that'll take some time. So have you got a sort of sense of, in your head, of how people should be viewing this as a regeneration story? How quickly do you build up?
Yeah, so to put it in context, we're about ready to finish off an internal 3D model on Las Conchitas. So it actually is fairly advanced on the exploration side. And with that, a normal mining company would be able to put out an inferred resource. I think today, a relatively small one on Las Conchitas in terms of where we're drilling right now. With that, that's the kind of data, and I think what we did with MDA is illustrative of how we work on this. Is that when the initial management changes happened in March, it was actually one of the best press releases that I wrote, because it was like 4 sentences, and that was it. It was former CEO resigns, we replace him with interim CEO Akiba, and we start drill program. That was it. So that was the press release that happened in March of last year. It took us with what grew to be about a 24,000 meter program to get our internal model set, and that was with a good 8 years of runway back from the Golden Rain side of things over there. And then once we were comfortable with how the model behaved, we gave that over to Steve Ristorcelli from MDA, and he mentioned this. This was like the first time that he's ever seen a junior mining company give him a geological model that he didn't have to redo from scratch. So we do good work over there. And right now, to put that in context of where we are over at Las Conchitas is basically where we were a few months prior to March of last year. So there is a runway before we can even get a maiden resource on Las Conchitas. But we're trying to do things as prudently, as effectively, as professionally as possible. I have no issues of giving interim updates. We put out all our holes that are on our press release. Glad to give talks like this to go over the details on how this is behaving. But until we're actually comfortable with the model, and then until we give that level of model which we're comfortable with to a third party, there's a limit to what we can actually put out there in the public domain in terms of resource.
Exactly, and I guess that's part of the constraint of that you're working in, because one of the first things we talked about here was people are not seeing the scale, and you're going to have to start addressing that over time. So in your head, are you saying, I'm going to be putting out regular resources? It's costly, it costs time, etc. But is that what you're going to need to do, or do you think you've got the confidence of the market to be able to say, hey, give me a year and we'll put out a resource on Las Conchitas, because we want to come to the market with something sizable and show you that we've got this scale? How do you come at it?
No, I think there's a lot for us to prove, like both historically in nature. I think both sides of the equation had an equivalent credibility gap for different reasons on the Marlin and Golden Rain side of things. So part of the exercise over the last year and a half is to earn back some of that credibility currency, which I think we've actually been fairly decent at doing. I don't think we're certainly not the type of group saying, oh, trust us, do this, give us money to do over that target. We've clearly not demonstrated our success on that. Even with respect to the capital raise that went on in June, I would say the principal reason why we were able to do for the first time in either company's history, on either side of the company's history, a true syndicated bought deal, I don't think had really anything to do specifically with us, our approach, or even to a certain extent the asset. I think it was just because the gold tape was pretty attractive in June. So we're not there yet on getting the full buy-in for the market. That's okay. It really is on us to execute. Now, in terms of putting out interim resources, I do believe, and actually you saw this in terms of what Steve and I put out with this resource estimate, is that I do think it's very important to frame things correctly. Is that when you're putting out a document, you're putting out a document which is your best guess on what's there. If you're putting out a document where you're leaving the constraints of the resource open, it doesn't do anybody any benefit. So we're going to be open, but until we actually have the constraints, not of the entire Las Conchitas property, but of the areas that we're drilling. Like we just need to find the constraints of it. And as soon as we find the constraints, then we have no issues putting out an inferred resource that we can actually put our stamp of approval on. Because it's not even just about drilling here and there and then giving it to MDA to put out an inferred resource. It's drilling it here or there, doing the internal three-dimensional modeling of it, make sure that we're comfortable, handing off that internal model to an external guy to validate our work, and then putting it out. And it takes time to do that.